Well, welcome and thank you so much for being here with us today to this presentation on unlocking your creativity to break through, art making for insight, enjoyment, and expression. My name is Danah Hendrickson. I'm an associate professor of educational leadership and innovation in the Teachers College at Arizona State University. My research focus is really around creativity and education and all of its forms and intersections, but I have a particular interest on creativity in relation to mindfulness and well-being. So I've done a lot of research in that area. And I'm really excited to be here today and honored to be with my colleague, Natalie Gruber, as we walk you through the open studio process as part of this workshop presentation. So Natalie, would you like to introduce yourself and get us started?
Yes, thank you, Danah, and thank you for joining us. My name is Natalie Gruber. I am a doctoral candidate in the Teachers College at ASU. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I have certifications in art therapy and mindfulness facilitation. And I am involved in research and scholarship at the intersections of mindfulness, relational well-being, mental health, and creativity. So before we begin, we are going to invite you to gather your art materials now and set aside about 45 minutes to do this activity with us. So we have some suggestions for you on materials that you can collect that you probably have around your house already. You might want to grab either colored pencils, markers, or oil pastels, anything that would allow you to create an image with a relatively short amount of time. We're going to be using paper that's not too big, not too small. And we would suggest, if you have it, to grab any circular object in your house, and you could use it to trace onto the paper to get your image ready to just create a structure for yourself in which to create your image. Thank you. Next slide, please. And in this workshop, we are going to be covering the open studio process model. We're going to introduce it, provide some context and background, and give you a sense of how this could be relevant for you personally and potentially for your work environment. And we'll lead you through the model step by step so you have a really good understanding and get to experience the model for yourself. And then we will help you reflect on your experience and also share a few resources should you wish to learn more.
Thank you, Natalie. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of background and kind of an introduction to set the stage for what the open studio process is and how it emerged. It was actually developed by Dr. Patricia Allen. She's a highly acclaimed art therapist. She's a pioneer in her field. She's also the author of lots of articles on different facets of art therapy. She's the author of several books on the arts, on spirituality and well-being. One of those is Art as a Way of Knowing. The other is Art as a Spiritual Path. But importantly, she's also a co-founder of the Open Studio Project, which originated in Evanston, Illinois, and also of Studio Pardes in Illinois. Both of these settings are very grounded in open community settings where anybody can drop in and do art and go through this particular art therapy process whenever they want to. It's quite open. And her aim was really to kind of democratize the field of art therapy and bring it out into the world so that it could be something that you don't need to be sitting in a psychotherapist, professional art therapist office to do it. People could drop into these very communal settings and learn about and go through the process. Natalie and I learned about this open studio model when we had a chance to interview Dr. Allen nearly 2 years ago now. We are particularly hoping to bring her work on the open studio process to more people in the field of education, to teachers, students, schools, other settings or community settings where people might be interested in learning how to support theirs and others' sense of creativity and well-being or healing. So we're really excited to share this model with you today, which Natalie will be walking you through in a little while. I wanted to also note that the open studio process It was really aimed at both drawing on and also improving traditional art therapy and using what works from traditional art therapy, but also making it more accessible, more egalitarian, more democratic, and less focused on having that external psychoanalysis from an expert about what people are creating. So in this model, the facilitator does not need to be an art therapist. Natalie is a trained art therapist, but that's not necessary to lead this model or facilitate it. The facilitator is really just there to provide the process and to help participants to follow it and kind of be a guide through that. So while Natalie is going to go over these 3 steps of the structured process in more detail, I just wanted to give you a quick sense of what those will be and how simple and clear it is. The first step is for participants to set an intention, then write it down and let it go. The next step is to make art, and then you write in response to whatever comes up, or just try to be a witness to whatever emerges for you through this process. And you'll have a chance to do that today. I wanted to mention also that Dr. Allen has really used this open studio model in many different settings. As I mentioned, she's used it in several community and group settings, but she's also used it in lots of high schools and universities, mental health facilities. She talked about how in using it in school settings, it has incredible value for students who are working through difficult or troubling experiences, particularly those who have had some trauma in their life or really need help with mental and emotional support or emotion regulation. But she also really emphasized that the model has value for anybody, wherever you're at in life, however you're feeling. You don't need to be working with people who are struggling with trauma. It can be beneficial there, but it really can benefit anybody. So when she facilitated the model herself in many classrooms, she trained teachers in a range of different education settings to facilitate it and be the guide. But it doesn't require a lot of training. The beauty of this is that you don't have to be a counselor, you don't have to be a social worker, you don't have to be an art therapist to do it. You just need to know that process and follow a few simple rules. So I wanted to just highlight that fact that it is a structured process, and we're going to go through that structure. And that means that there's some natural guardrails that are up on the process. So you can feel comfortable walking students through this, whether they are people who are, like I said, struggling with a trauma, or just students who could use some insight into their life. It's also very much built on Dr. Allen's view of the creative process itself, which is quite different from many Western or more psychological internalized views of creativity. Many traditional psychological views in creativity really view creativity as something that happens in the mind and that you bring outward into the world. Instead, she really looks at creativity as something that you allow it to move through your body, through your mind, because it stems from what she often refers to as the creative source. She's very intentional about not defining the creative source as having a specific or particular spiritual identity. The notion of the creative source really is something that emerges with and can align with any religion or with no religion. One of the things that she said to us, which we thought was really powerful, is this quote that's here on this page, that she sees creativity as a force that's larger than any human being. And yet it's something that attaches us to something that's larger than ourselves. She said, I call it the creative source. Other people call it God or nature or so on. It's a basic operating principle of life. So that unique view is sort of what drives this structured process that isn't so focused on heavy external interpretation. It's about what comes through you and what emerges for you in doing the process. And I think that's actually something, this view, that really helps take the pressure off creativity that many people feel. People often feel quite nervous about being asked to do art if they're not a trained artist, or they feel very nervous about viewing themselves as having to be creative. But if you see it as something that you don't have to come up with yourself, but that you simply make the space for and allow for, it really allows you to engage with the process, to make meaning, to feel creative and be creative. So we're now going to move into that process, and Natalie is going to be your guide for that. So Natalie, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Danah. So we are going to be engaging in this 3-step process where we will be very soon setting an intention for ourselves, what we would like to perhaps gain a little bit more insight about in our own lives. That could be our personal or our professional lives as we're trying this out here for ourselves. And then we're going to be engaging in an art making process where we are focused on the 3 E's: energy, moving the energy through us, of creativity, our embodiment, our sense of what it physically feels like to make this art, and enjoyment. We're going to be focusing on art making to move energy and feel enjoyment. So we are not at all concerned with really the outcome of what our art making process will, what we will create, what it will look like, but we are more focused on going through this process. And then at the end, we are going to be engaging in written reflection of what this process was like. So we are going to go ahead and get started. And before we do that, we want to keep in mind some important rules about engaging in this process. So we're not necessarily doing this in a group setting the way we're doing it here, but very oftentimes, like at the Open Studio project, we engage in this process as a group. So sometimes when we're making art, judgment arises and we feel the impulse to speak and have a judgment about our art, or we might even feel compelled to comment on someone else's art. So we don't do that through this model. We don't judge our own art and we don't make comments on other people's art. You are free to look at other people's art when you're doing this in a group setting, or if you're facilitating this with students, they can look at each other's art, and you could even bring in images that you see from other people's art onto your own artwork. And we are very focused on our internal experience of making the art, that sense of embodiment. How does it feel in your body to work with the art materials? Maybe there are emotions that are arising for you. What does that feel like in your body? And another rule is we want you to take all the time that we've set aside for you to work on your creation. So in this particular setting, we're taking 15 minutes. And then if you're in a group setting and you get stuck, you are more than welcome to ask for help, or students can ask for help. But before we do that, before we ask another person, we want to ask the image first. And the reason for that is we are really entering into a relationship with our images. And we can talk more about that at the end. But we are very focused on our internal process of creating and getting into sort of an internal dialogue with our art. So next slide, please. All right, so now really is the time to make sure you have those art materials ready. Again, that would be paper, pencil, something to write with also, and then markers, colored pencils, whatever it is that you have on hand. And we do suggest that you use a circular image and trace it onto the paper. That just creates sort of a container for your image and might help you focus a little bit more. But just so you know, your mandala, as it is called when we're working inside an image, does not need to take on any particular pattern or intricate detail. It's whatever image arises and comes through for you as you're making this, as you're engaging in this process. So next slide, please. Thank you. So what we're going to begin with, this is not part of Pat Allen's model, but since we're sort of doing this artificially, we're going to begin with a practice that will allow us to sort of pull up maybe any emotion or make whatever situation we'd like to get more insight into a little bit more fresh for us, pull it up and make it a little more vivid. So we're going to be opening with a meditation practice called Rain. So right now, I invite you to get into a comfortable posture. We'll be here for just a few minutes, and make sure that you're upright, but still comfortable. And I would suggest making sure your feet are grounded and flat on the floor. So you might need to scooch in your chair. And you can do this with your eyes open or closed. And if you're going to keep your eyes open, I'm just going to suggest you just sort of soften and lower your gaze so we're not feeling distracted. But we're going to begin by just taking a few gentle breaths here. And notice your body sitting in your chair, the weight and the shape of your body, and the way that gravity pulls your body downward. So now we're going to pull up whatever situation or problem it is that you're going to use to focus on the Open Studio project model. And we want to pull up something we'd like to have more insight about, but not anything that's overly challenging. So let's just choose a small to medium-sized challenge that we'd like to have a little bit more awareness and insight about. So once you've called that situation into your mind, I'm going to invite you to recognize first how it is that you're feeling about that situation. So see if you can put a label on it. And you don't have to do this with 100% accuracy. Let's see how close you can get to accurately naming the emotion that you're feeling about this situation. And then we're going to investigate it. When we investigate, we are looking for body sensations connected with our emotion about this situation. So just noticing, most of us tend to feel our emotions in our belly, maybe our chest, throat, and face. So notice if there's any strong emotional sensations connected with this. So physical sensations of our emotions. This is embodiment. Noticing how we're feeling from the inside out. And then finally, we're going to engage in the N of rain, which can stand for a lot of things, like non-identification. So notice if you can view yourself as the witness of this emotion, the one that feels the emotion, as separate from the emotion itself. And we might also offer some nurture to ourselves here, a little bit of kindness. And that could just be through a mental phrase. And that mental phrase could be connected to this process. So may I gain more insight and wisdom about this. May I move through this. This too shall pass. Anything that you can offer to yourself, a little bit more support, a little bit kindness, gentleness. Okay, so just noticing your whole body again, sitting here. Notice how you're feeling. When you're ready, we will open our eyes. And we'll end our meditation. And we'll move right into the model. So this is the time for us to take out our paper and something to write with. And we're going to take just about 2 minutes here to write your intention. So we just worked with a sense of embodiment connected with whatever situation or problem we might have that we want to gain more insight and clarity on through engaging in this model. So we're going to write our intentions here in a very clear, specific manner. And we'll write it in the first person. So it could be something like, I release any, whatever emotion might have just come up for you, I am feeling, and I ask for guidance and insight about fill in the blank, whatever situation or problem you might be working with today. So we're going to write about it, and then we're going to offer it up to the creative source, to something outside of ourselves. And so once we set it, we can just let go of it and forget it before we engage in this art making experience. So what I'm going to do is invite you to pause the video for 2 minutes or however long it takes you to write. You don't need a lot of time to write an intention. And then after you're done writing your intention, unpause the video, and Danah and I will meet you on the next slide in the next phase of this process. All right, so you're unpausing the video, you have just written your intention and we're setting it and we're forgetting it. Let's let it go. Now is the time for us to spend about 15 minutes working to create an image. And again, the emphasis here is on moving energy, noticing, like kind of like we were just doing within the meditation, noticing the sensations in your body, maybe even noticing what you're thinking and feeling as you're doing this, and really try to enjoy yourself. This is about pleasure. This is about enjoying ourselves and creating something and having a little fun with it. So if you get stuck, remember, you can ask your image, maybe what it needs, maybe what you need to know. And we are going to invite you here to pause the video and take about 15 minutes to work on your image. And when it is complete, you can unpause the video and we will meet you on the next slide. Okay, so we've just created our artwork. And now is time for reflection. We're moving back into writing. So let's take about 5 minutes here to free write. So this is spontaneous, unfiltered, maybe insight, response to this process, what this process was like for you, response perhaps to your image, whatever arises for about 5 minutes, and let's use the whole time. Just write and see what comes to mind. So we're going to invite you now to pause the video. And when you have completed your 5 minutes of free writing, we will invite you to unpause the video again, and we'll be wrapping up with some reflection. Okay, so we have just engaged in the open studio process model. So what I'm going to invite you to do is come back within yourself. So again, with eyes open or closed, maybe just take a couple of breaths here. And notice how you're feeling. Maybe notice whether anything has shifted for you. Do the internal sensations of your emotions feel any different from when we first started out doing rain? Maybe ask yourself, have you gained any insight or perspective on whatever situation you may have been working with? And ask yourself, what was this process like for you? If this process was difficult for you in some way, challenging, or maybe you didn't feel much of anything, that is perfectly okay. Maybe offer yourself a little bit of kindness. Oftentimes a process we sometimes need to engage in the process multiple times before we connect with it. Or maybe you did really investigate something, and maybe you're walking away with an insight that you may not have had otherwise. And if that's the case, see if you can really affirm that for yourself. And finally, you might want to ask yourself, is this process, or how could this process be relevant for the people that you work with, whether that's students or other teachers or whomever you might be working with and interacting with? So who could you share this process with, and how? And so finally, as we're ending, maybe see if you could offer yourself just a bit of kindness and appreciation for showing up here, for trying something new, and engaging in this open studio process. Whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes, and we'll end this process, this practice. Thank you, Danah.
Thank you, Natalie.
So if you are curious to learn more, we would like to invite you to check out the article that Danah and I wrote that features Pat and involved our interview with Pat. And this article provides a great amount of information about context on the process, and it also provides the process itself in detail at the end. So that would be a great place to start if you're curious to learn more. Pat Allen's website has a lot of information about her and her work. And we're also really happy to share that the Open Studio Project is a very thriving community-based arts organization that is offering this model still to this day in Evanston, Illinois. So you could check that out too. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, we really want to encourage you that if you, Natalie offered some great resources there, and we'd highly recommend the Pat Allen article, which was the first link, because at the very end of that, there's a full kind of overview of the whole process, which is throughout the article too, but there's a nice concrete step-by-step, all of the things that Natalie took you through today. But also please feel free to get in touch with us. We'd love to hear more about your experiences of using this either with us today, or if you take it further and you're using it in other settings or try it out with others, we'd love to know more about that. And Natalie, you also have your Instagram there too, I believe.
Yeah, so I'm going to be posting my image that I made, and I hope that you share your image with me. But yes, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, and we have other mindfulness creativity work that we'd be happy to share, other facets that aren't the exact same thing as the Open Studio project, but some other mindfulness creativity scholarship that we'd be happy to share if you're interested as well. With that, I want to just start by saying thank you for being here today and taking the time to engage. That really means a lot. We understand that time is a valuable resource. So taking some of that today to engage with this process is very powerful and meaningful. And we hope that you gain some insights from it or are interested in using it again and engaging with it. And Natalie, anything you want to add?
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Thank you for engaging in this process. And we really hope that it was beneficial to you in some way. And perhaps a seed has been planted here that you too could share this process within your work context with students or whomever it is that you work with. Because I really believe that anyone can benefit from this.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Thank you. With that, I finish the screen sharing, and we'll just wish you well and all good things going forward.
Thank you.